my point is that if you have it to where you can get to a different conclusion from the same arguments, it means that there might be something deeper going on here that for people who are actually philosophers, not rhetoricians, need to be dealing with.
Okay, we got to move to the next question, but let me just ask you this so we can clarify where we are.
Yeah.
Do you agree that there are only males and females in the human race?
No.
Okay, so you definitely don't agree with my conclusion then at all.
No.
We actually are totally on opposite sides of this question, it turns out. Okay, so what are the other categories if not male and female?
We're going to be here all night if I have to doing that.
We're not, because there's none that you can list, so it's actually a very short conversation.
All right, well, you're wanting to say that you have these other social categories, right? It's a question of, you're saying are, right? So the question here for me would be one of ontology, insofar as we're trying to posit that there is some kind of specificity, right? And you would look at something like intersex and say that this is like some kind of weird border case, right? It's a question of the kind of continuum that would allow for one to come into an embodiment that you would cast as male and female. I mean, something that's really interesting is you said that something like age is makes more sense to identify as. You at one point had, female genitalia when you were in utero. So you've passed through that, right? And what happens to intersex people is that there's just some kind of like different, there's a different of development that occurs there. So respective to us talking about these categories, it's not a case of there being this hardline thing. I mean, the reason why we also are not going to get anywhere here is because I actually would agree with you that something like woman is what would, in a technical sense, be called a floating signifier. So it doesn't have this like particular designatable meaning to it, right?
All right.
So that's why we're not going to go anywhere.
That's pretty clear. But I appreciate it. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I just want to make just two quick follow-ups on that. Is that one thing? I think that this is a tactic that you encounter on the left all the time when it comes to gender, which is to try to obscure it and make it sound complicated and to throw a lot of, these sort of abstract ideas into it. And from what I've discovered, and this conversation didn't change my view at all on that, is that that's the only tactic they have, right? Is to just try to make it seem complicated, but yet while also not offering any alternative answers at all. And the final thing on intersex, because maybe someone else will bring this up, just so we could get that question out of the way, because it always comes up. Number one, intersex, that category has nothing to do with trans, right? Trans man or trans woman is a biological male who identifies as a female. So even if I were to agree that intersex people are some sort of exception, that would do nothing to vindicate the trans man, because that's a different category. But as it turns out, intersex people are not an exception. These are people who suffer from a deformity, from a condition. Just like someone might be born with one arm rather than two. That does not negate or undermine the fact that human beings have two arms. But if someone is born with only one, then you know that something went wrong along the way. They ought to have had two, but they didn't because something went wrong. So a deformity or a sickness doesn't undermine the principle